Sveiki visiem! Šī diskusija notiks angļu valodā, vai ir kāds, kuram būs nepieciešams tulkojums latviešu valodā? Tie varbūt var pacelt rokas, un jums tiks izsniegtas austiņas. Nevienam tulkojums nebūs nepieciešams. All right, so welcome to the discussion, language and democracy. I am very pleased to welcome you all here on this rainy afternoon, and I'm delighted to introduce the panel. And first of all, I'd like to introduce Tunas Lienes. She is the head of the Asen Language Museum, which is one of the museum departments within the Norwegian Museum of Written Culture. And she's also heading the International Network of Language Museums. She has background from communication work, development aid, diplomacy, and leadership. Welcome. Next up is Regita Zeiļa. Member of NGO Valoda and local community activist living in Rēzekne. She has a background in cultural and social anthropology and geography. Her work is connected with social economy and innovation. Well, very welcome. And the next up is Olav Øyehaug Opsvik. Did I do a good job with pronunciation? He is the managing director of the Norwegian Museum of Written Culture. He is in charge of 3 museums related to Norwegian nynorsk, written culture and history, with their related collections and archives. Each of the 3 museums have their own festival, and the Norwegian Museum of Written Culture also curates and organizes tours and exhibitions all over Norway, as well as international collaborations. And finally, Snorre Karkonen Svensson is one of the co-founders of House of Languages, which is a culture hub for languages and aspiring language museum. He is a teacher and works on language learning and teaching related projects, including the project Nordic Language Initiative. So this project has to do with introducing Nordic languages as a viable alternative as a second foreign language for grade 5 in Latvian schools. And finally, me, who's going to be moderating this discussion today. My name is Signe Kazāka, and I am a linguist, I'm a language teacher, and I'm also involved in Nordic Language Initiative and the Aspiring Language Museum Initiative. So I would like to start by a little sort of small, short discussion about the topic of our today's talk, which is language and democracy, and we will be focusing on lesser used languages. So I would like to ask our panelists, when they hear the words lesser used languages and democracy, what are the things that spring to your mind? You can go ahead.
Me?
Oh.
Okay,
yep.
Thank you. When I think about lesser used languages and democracy, I think about every citizen's right to own their own cultural identity in order to face the world, basically. In terms of my own story, I grew up in an area where everybody writes Norwegian nynorsk, and I wasn't aware of being sort of a minority before I moved out of my own area. And I think that's a sort of experience many people who use lesser used languages have. And I think that's an important thing for everyone else to be aware that it's kind of a shock to go out into the world and then realize you have to fight to keep your own cultural identity.
Thank you.
For me, as I'm anthropologist by training, I would say that language is a way how we self-express and how we also form the way how we think, how we interact, and also how we encounter our lives. So our native language is amazingly important in how we perceive the world, because it's about the constructions of different kind of places and things, how we are learning and how we are also perceiving the relationship with the external world. That's why I think it's crucial part of the democracy that everybody has a place and everybody has a way of also the self-expression of the identity. So I would say that it is crucial that we acknowledge, but also give spaces for those languages to exist and also to develop and have their place.
For me, I think a lesser used language in Norway, we have, for instance, 2 written languages. And you don't see the lesser used language as often. For me, it's close to heart, close to how I speak. So I have to work a little bit harder, I think, than what the language that the majority uses. But also it creates a community where you stand together maybe a little bit more as a group. And also you can find similar community across borders in different countries, as we are here today.
And I will be personal. As a child, I collected stamps, and that opened a totally new world for me, and I got interested in many different things, among them language and politics. And later, I was politically active in secondary school, but when I started to study, I studied languages, and I also continued to work as a teacher and researcher. But for the last years, I worked in House of Languages, where I combined these 2 passions of mine, language and politics, because language is such a powerful tool, and when used right, we can use that for positive change in society. But language is also something we have to fight for. And when I came to Latvia many, many years ago, coming from Norway, where we also have 2 standardized written languages, as in Latvia, then I was shocked that Latgalian didn't have its due place in Latvian culture and Latvian society. So that has been something that I always wanted to work on, to give help to give Latgalian its due place when you compare to Norway.
Yeah. And if I could just add one more thing, when you talk about lesser used languages and democracy, I think it's crucial to remember that it's about belonging. And in order for democracy to work, everybody has to feel that they belong somewhere in order to trust each other and have a strong standing point. So I think that's a very important thing to remember, belonging.
And also, democracy is a place where it goes together with diversity. So that is a healthy democracy should be pluralistic and should have place for also linguistic diversity, also having place for lesser used languages like Latgalian and Livonian in Latvia.
And many people most probably already heard a couple of names here that were expressed, like Nynorsk and Latgalian, and I wonder how many people actually know about Latgalian and about Nynorsk, and how much do people know about it. And I guess I would like to ask our panelists to give a little bit of a background of Nynorsk, explain a little bit to some people who might actually hear it for the first time, and then maybe a little bit more about Latgalian. Of course, in Latvia, people know a lot about it, but maybe there are things that we still need to discover.
Sure. So I'll start with Nynorsk. Nynorsk has been one of the 2 official Norwegian languages since 1885. But it's the lesser used one of the 2 Norwegian languages. We also have minority languages in Norway, so this is not a minority language. It's one of the 2 official Norwegian languages. So when in 1814, Norway had its first constitution, and we started a process of gaining full independence. And then there started a debate in society about we should have our own language, because back then everyone was writing Danish. So one man to make a long story short, one man ended up doing all the work of creating a true Norwegian written language, which is Ivar Aasen. He came from our hometown, and that's where we have our main museum, is where Ivar Aasen grew up. And so Ivar Aasen felt that Norwegians needed their own true language derived from the plurality of Norwegian dialects. So he traveled all over Norway in the 19th century and collected words from all the different Norwegian languages and dialects, and he also had some inspiration from Old Norse, and then he created grammar, dictionaries, and finally started using this language. So since the end of the 19th century, it's been active and vivid language in Norway, and still is to this day, but it's the lesser used of the two Norwegian languages, so it's about 10 to 15% of the Norwegian population who has nynorsk as their main language. But it's also important to note that every Norwegian learns nynorsk in school, so there are more than 5 million people who know how to use and read and write nynorsk.
About Latgalian language, I would say that those who are from Latvia know that Latgalian language is mostly used in the Latgala region, and why do we, so to say, speak differently, or why is it so, is because of the historical reasons of the development and how we have been part of Poland in the times when the other parts of Latvia have been part of the Sweden, and I would say that it's also because of different culture and also different development what we have had, and it is important to also see how those differences sometimes also influence different other things. And for example, if we talk about religion, if the other parts of Latvia are Lutheran, then in Latgale the most common religion is Catholics, because of our history and our connectedness with the Polish-Lithuanian empire, so to say. And of course, also the development of the language has been very much connected with historical events. Like, for example, because of Polish riots, the written form of the Latin written form was prohibited, and that's why you could only write in Kirillitsa, or how it's in English, the Cyrillic, and that has been one of the reasons why also the development of the region has been slower in sometimes, and also why the region is, I would personally say, more conservative still. And about the language, it has also been developing, but at the same time, it has had so many periods of when it has been prohibited that it hasn't had time to develop, and there have been many times when in larger picture the Latgalian language was meant to be normalized or prohibited, and for example, if we talk about the 30s, when it was time of Ulmanis, then the main idea was that we should normalize Latvian language, and the Latgalian should be prohibited. You couldn't use it in schools, you couldn't actually have all of those things that the language should have. And because when our country was created, so to say, the Latgalian was in schools, and it was taught. It was very normal, and also, of course, the development of the language has been very much connected with the church, because the first written forms of the language, in many languages, it is so that the first written forms are religious texts, and it has been the same with the Latgalian language. And it still actually is very much connected sometimes with the church, and that is the space where it exists. But at the same time, not only there, and I would say that nowadays there has been like a revolution or renewal of the language activism. And since 2005, 2006, there has been very strong movements in in the Latgalian identity, and also the organization that I represent was created in 2005, so 20 years ago, as a student movement. So students came together and understood that it's okay to speak Latgalian, and it's okay, and it's very good, and we are proud that we are speaking Latgalian, and we need the space to be together, to be in a community, as you also mentioned, and to develop this identity that we can belong with it, and we can speak with our kids in Latgalian, and we can also have books in Latgalian, and we can also develop it as a place, and also to fight for that place for Latgalian language in a political sense as well.
Yeah, and so that what Regita tells us explains why the situation is different in Norway and Latvia regarding the two written language traditions of each of the countries. It is because of politics and because of lack of democracy, because Latgalian had these three setbacks. First in 1864 with the prohibition of using Latin letters, then Ulmanis regime 1934, and then the Soviet regime. And Latgalian has still not recovered, although things are happening, still not recovered to the level it had in the 20s, where it was much more used in schools than now. And also another difference is what the linguist Nicole now has called the double analphabetism of Latgalian, because Latgalians themselves have only few have learned the language in schools and are proficient in writing the language, and for many it's even easier to read Latvian than Latgalian, because Latvian is school language. And also other Latvians, because other Latvians are not exposed to this variety of the Latvian language. Latgalian, it's something you hear seldom, it's something you read seldom, and that is different from Norway. Of course, there's less nynorsk in society in Norway than bokmål, which is the majority version of Norwegian, but still you hear it in television and radio, and there are subtitles for instance, for movies and series in television in nynorsk, the lesser used language, and it's used by state and municipalities and so on.
Yeah, it's completely true, and it's very inspiring to hear you telling about the positive development of the Latgalian culture, because whenever I go abroad, like when we're back in Norway, we're always fighting for nynorsk and feeling kind of like the underdog. But when we go abroad and learn about other lesser used languages, I always end up feeling quite lucky, because there's been so much good work done in the past for the nynorsk language that we reap the fruits from today. And so since the end of the 19th century, they were very early on establishing publishing houses, newspapers, and theaters and different institutions promoting the language, and many of these institutions and organizations are still active today. In fact, we lead the Nynorsk Forum, where all of these different nynorsk organizations meet a few times a year to discuss and develop the culture further. And so there's been very great work done with nynorsk language in the past century, which makes us well positioned today, even though we also have challenges. Yeah.
And maybe a little bit about where nynorsk and Latgalian fit in the regional sense, like in the Nordic Baltic region, in the regional language landscape, so to speak.
Yeah. So many Norwegians think it's unique that there are two written languages within one language. It's not that unique, and even here so there's Latvia, of course, with Latvian and Latgalian, but standard Latvian and Latgalian, but it's also in Estonia, where there is South Estonian. It's Võru and Seto are the two main varieties of South Estonian, and so also that's also standardized written languages that are lesser used varieties of Estonian, or they sometimes also define it as a separate language. But there are lots of other lesser used languages in or minority languages in the Nordic Baltic area. There are these like eight big languages for the five Nordic countries and the 3 Baltic. But there is also Faroese, Greenlandic. In Denmark, there's a German-speaking minority. In Finland, then Swedish is the lesser used language. It's official language, but they also have to fight for their place. And there are also other languages like Romanian, Yiddish, and of course in the northern part of Norway, Sweden, and Finland, there is several Sami languages, which is also connected to our Nordic Baltic area.
That sounds absolutely amazing. We're rich in having all those regional, like our region is rich in different kinds of languages. But I'd like to move on and speak a little bit about what is going on with Nynorsk and Latgalian right now, and about the status of both languages, about the projects that you are all involved in, about the activities. Maybe let's start with Nynorsk.
Or we can start with Linguapolis, which is presented here today. We got support from the ES grants, and we had a discussion here in Latvia actually with a focus group, and then also in Norway, to find out exactly what is the situation for the people that use the language Latgalian and Nynorsk. What are the challenges, and what is the big heart saying, like how do you feel about the language? And we were inspired to make a digital exhibition where we promote the identity and the self-confidence to use less used language. And in the exhibition, you can visit it online after, and you can explore a fantasy city where you see the use of the smaller languages in every part of society. And also you can hear stories from like the big network in Norway working on Nynorsk, and also the users of Latgalian in Latvia and also elsewhere.
And it can be done by just scanning the QR code,
yes,
right?
So it's this, well, that QR code goes to English and that to Latgalian, but the exhibition is in 4 languages, Nynorsk, Latgalian, Latvian, and English. I think it's the only web page in the world with this, this language combination. But why Linguapolis? Why put these, both Nynorsk and Latgalian are connected to the countryside and are connected to the past? But for us, it was important to pull both these languages out of this concept of being old-fashioned and connected to countryside and past, and that's why we made this language city for the languages where we have these 2 languages, but there are also some other languages represented there, to show that a language is not in a specific ideology or a specific place, but it is within every user of this language. And Riga is, for instance, maybe the largest city of Latgalian language users. But do we see Latgalian in Riga cityscape on signs, in Riga Satiksmes app? No, although there are a lot of Latgalians in Riga. So we want to show that language is everywhere. If it's in Riga or Berlin or New York, where there are users, there the language lives. Especially now in our global, where we can move easily and where we're in a digitalized society. Very short about what you can find in the exhibition. So there are a lot of videos, with some 60 videos with different people from Norway, Latvia, and other places that speak about their experience, both about history and so on, but mainly personal stories to inspire to use lesser used languages. And they are like thematically, you see different buildings here. So there is in the main is the democracy square, and then there's the archive, school, city hall, cafe, sacred building, and media building, and community house. So they focus on different areas within culture, literature, education, politics, and activism.
Quickly about what we do at Latgalīšu kultūras kustībā Valoda is we are actually very active in work with youngsters. Like we have different things for the youngsters, like camps that we organize every second year. We also work with teachers who are teaching Latgalian. So this summer there will be a camp for language teachers. But what we also do, and what is one of the cornerstones of our work, is also a digital news platform, Lakuga, Latgalīšu kultūras gazeta, Lakuga LV. And it's a place that is writing in Latgalian every single day. So there you can learn about everything that is happening in Latgale region, and also about the culture, music, about the news, about the stories, history, and many other things. And what we also do, we publish books. So we have many great books also for kids. We publish children book, but also literature for adults. And what we do is also we have projects that are digital, and I think that that is the future of the Latgalian language as well, to be very present in different spaces and also on your phones. So, for example, you can have ways in Latgalian language, or you can have also AI models that talk to you in Latgalian. So, I would say that the organization itself has transformed the way how we see and how we think about the Latgalian language. So, it's very vibrant, and also our work is overreaching different audiences, and we try to be very present also with the modern concepts. We organize different contests also for the writers that write in Latgalian. So every year there's a competition where you can submit your writing, either it's a poetry or a book, and also like different other formats like poetry slam and other great things that our colleagues are doing.
May I add also a little bit more about how we work with the Nynorsk as a culture institution in Norway? Because we have our association has 3 museums, and although children learn Nynorsk at school, it's important that they also experience it in very many different ways. So we have a lot of culture productions like theater and concerts, and we have festivals, both for kids and also for adults, to really feel the language and also experience the literature directly. And we find it very important to also work with the local community. Topic of today's discussion is language and democracy. And we are really dependent on the local community, both to sort of visit our events and promote the work together, but also to work with the municipalities and lobby for the right of the language, to be part of the plans in kindergartens, in schools, to be used in businesses and all around society. And we work together as both activists and or different organizations in order to sort of lift the language in our local society, and we really need each other. It's different roles.
Yeah, it's just would like to add that I'm really proud of this collaboration and Lingua Polis, and what you're saying, Snorre, about language being something that's being used today. Like, we're a museum, and museums are also often associated with the past. But our institution is founded on an idea of being present in what's happening today and also in the future. And so our main building where we have our headquarters is a very modern building. And it's always been about being connected to the recent, like the newest forms of literature or different forms of cultural expressions where nynorsk is being used and showing this to the world all the time. So, yeah.
I guess we could talk a little bit more about the status of both of the languages, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm.
Sure. So, like I said, nynorsk is the main language for about 10 to 15% of the Norwegian population today. It's hard to measure, but it's like 500,000-600,000 people, and it's strong. It's stable in a way, but there's a challenge with demographic changes that more and more people are moving into the bigger cities of Norway. This is a challenge for nynorsk because nynorsk is mainly it's the dominant language in large parts of the southwestern Norway. So even though it's not a regional language, there's still a region where it's more used than other parts of the language of the country. And when people are moving towards the capital like Oslo or Bergen, which is also a bigger city, that's a challenge for the Norwegian language, nynorsk language. But it's still like it's doing okay. And I would also say in recent years, like the past 20-25 years maybe, the acceptance of using nynorsk has only increased in society, and we can see that on television, online, in the big national newspapers, there's more and more nynorsk being used and accepted there. So it's like, it's good and bad, it's stable. I would say that digitalization is also a challenge for nynorsk, but also, of course, brings a lot of opportunities. Yeah.
Regita, maybe you could paint us a picture about Latgalian.
I would say that now is a time for the Latgalian language normalization, but it's tricky. You know, right now it's tricky in a way that we are in a good position where it has been normalized, but at the same time, the population that, for example, would be speaking Latgalian with their kids is declining because, there have been different times when it's when it's better to speak with your kid in Latvian, so that he or she wouldn't have an accent in a school, and that I know less and less smaller kids who would be having Latgalian language as a native language, And also for me, it was the situation that my parents were speaking Latgalian in between themselves, but with me, with the kids, they were speaking in Latvian. And for us, the Latgalian language was something that you speak with your grandma and your dog, for example, in my case. So it was a language that you kind of have somewhere, but at the same time, already my generation, I'm the one that I don't think in Latgalian, I think in Latvian, but I speak Latgalian and I write in Latgalian, not in a perfect way also, but right now it's good that we have like normative writing, it's one important part of the language, but at the same time, it has been the biggest discussion topic about whether we should have this one normalized, normative way of writing in Latgalian, because Latgalian is it's very vibrant and it differs a lot. You go in the north, you have a different Latgalian language than you speak in the south and the east. And that's why with the Latgalian language, from one side, it's very important to have this normalized way, but from the other part, of course, it brings up a lot of discussions how we should have it. And that's why I would say that we are in this debate for a bit too long, like should we write in a one way or should we write in the other? And then we have like two oppositions fighting in between, but it's such a small bubble that in that debate, we kind of lose the main thing.
Yeah, and I think that this is where something can be learned from Norway, both in where actually both written languages have much place for variety, that there are parallel forms, so you can choose the form in both written languages, form that is closer to your dialect, and that solves actually much of that problem that it has to be only one way that is correct, but that the norm is maybe not totally free, but it's a bit more flexible, and then we could concentrate on a more important thing than how to write things, because if people are afraid of writing correct and then choose to write in another language, we have lost the battle. So it's more important that people actually write and use the language, and then secondary how it's used, but it's important that it's used at all. And also about the status, that Latgalian has a status in the Latvian language law, and the Latvian state has a responsibility to protect Latgalian language and to help it to be preserved. But actually there is no state institution with this mandate to do this. So actually the Latvian state is not doing its job according to the law, I would say.
And also what is important is that it's not taught in schools. You know, it's like not the language that you would be learning in a school. We have schools that are teaching it as an extra curriculum activity, but of course it's based on the initiative of the teachers, whether they are able to do it, whether they have resources, and whether they want to have a Latgalian language as an extra curriculum activity. And then how you motivate the kids, like why would you have this extra curriculum activity to have your time and also motivation to kind of have a Latgalian in your daily life.
So I think Snorri is absolutely right that it's a very good thing in Norway that you're able to choose between different norms and being able to write in a way that's closer to your own dialect. And that's a very important part of the story of language in Norway, that society as a whole is quite tolerant of different dialects being spoken on television and stuff like that. And our museum is also a good example, because our 3 museums are quite far apart in different regions of the country with quite different dialects. So that's why in our organizations we have 3 different norms actually of how to write in the different museums, in order for everyone to be able to write close to their own dialect. But so this is a very good thing in Norway, but I still have to say the debates never end. Even though we're getting further in Norway, we're still fighting. Yeah.
I have a funny comment from today when we were coming here and Snorri was texting Regita. He was like, "Why is she not texting me in Latgalian?" Yes, that's a good question, right?
But you know, it's a weird thing about how when you meet person, you start talking in one language and then you stay in that language, right? And it's somewhere, and in Latgala, I have certain people that I talk to in Latgalian, and then I have certain people that I sometimes speak in Latgalian, sometimes in Latvian, and then I think it's all about like triangulation, who is the third person in a conversation. And then, you know, for example, I have a friend who is also working in Valoda, and once she's in the room, somehow everybody speaks Latgalian, and you're like, "Oh, I didn't know that you speak Latgalian," and oh, wow, yeah. So thanks, Laura. And because of Laura, like everybody kind of gets to Latgalian, and they're like, "Oh yeah, of course I speak Latgalian." And then it's like, "Why do we don't speak Latgalian?" And then it's like, "Oh wow, yeah. Why don't we?" But at the same time, writing in Latgalian is a bit complicated. Like you know, there's no default editing or or stuff like that. But yeah, so it's not natural for me to speak in Latgalian. There are rather like certain people that I would be completely talking in Latgalian. But for example, also with my parents, you know, as I mentioned, in my childhood we didn't speak Latgalian, but then there was a turning point when my father said, "No, let's talk in Latgalian." And from that day, we somehow are talking Latgalian with our parents, and now it's our language, right? So you can also change how you speak, and like what's your first language you choose to speak.
I think it's time to think about the future. So what does the future look like for Latgalian and Nynorsk? let's start with nynorsk.
It's bright as ever, of course. I think in nynorsk, I'm not like fearful for the future of nynorsk, even though there are obvious challenges for the language. But I think it's important to always keep, like we always have to stay awake and fight for the rights of every language user in nynorsk. So I think for the future, the most important things will be the use of the language in the digital sphere, like everywhere in the digital sphere. And of course also artificial intelligence will be a very important issues in years to come. And like AI brings some definite challenges. It makes the language very, like we can use nynorsk with ChatGPT or whatever today. It's doing quite well, but it's also just gives you back a really boring language, you know, whenever you speak to the language models. So I think it's crucial that we as language users and also the government is very aware of how we are going to use these models and still keep a living, vibrant language that varies, that brings out all the different quirks and cultural differences between all the people in the society. So if we use the AI models too much, it will sort of just make our language flat and boring. So that's an important challenge and to be aware of, but it's definitely good things happening. In Norway, the National Library is working together with universities to develop Norwegian language models, both nynorsk and bokmål, and they're using modern literature to feed these models with better language. So I think that's a very important work to be aware of. And other than that, I think like that's a cue for everyone actually. Like all of us in Europe need to start thinking that we have to create sort of our own digital cultural infrastructure and not be controlled by some billionaires in Silicon Valley, you know. So yeah, that's a start, I guess.
Anything to add about nynorsk, maybe?
I just wanted to say that even though, like before we had the digital tools, we had activists working for the rights of the users of the language. And when the digital tools came, we still have to work extra hard to get the digital tools in nynorsk as well. So there's always a struggle, but there's always a lot of opportunities. So I think, the digital tools also helps us to show that we are in it together, the whole country, and also across borders, as I said before. So I think, of course, there's so many opportunities, and will be exciting to see.
Yeah, and I like this. The topic of the discussion is about community democracy, and I think it's important to note that a lesser used language like nynorsk or Latgalian is dependent on a functioning democracy, but also that's a circle, because in order to have a functioning democracy, we need room for different cultures and languages. And this goes like all the way from volunteer work all over the countryside or wherever to the top of the government. We need everyone to work together to keep society alive and keep our cultures varied and exciting also in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll add to that that is important for, that goes not only for lesser used languages, but for other minorities in society. Like LGBT, about people with different impairs. It goes for immigrants, for each of these minority groups that need support from the majority. And this goes also both for nynorsk and Latgalian, and for nynorsk it is systemized through school, that everybody learns nynorsk in school, and that everybody is exposed for the language. But here for Latgalian, that the usage of Latgalian in a national context is still not that normalized, and it's important that people who isn't a part of this minority or doesn't have this language, that they are supportive, so that, for instance, at House of Languages we are now developing a textbook for Latgalian as foreign language, so that also people who don't have it as mother tongue can use it. We have translated book into first contemporary translation into Latgalian of contemporary literature, and these are like small steps to that the status of the language is higher, and that people are not afraid to use it also in a national context.
Yeah, and what I'd like to add, like when I speak about our work as a museum and a cultural institution, I always love to use like the metaphor of cultivating. It's like tending a garden. You know, it never ends. You always have to throw some old plants out and bring some new, and that's the same with cultivating our own cultures, because there will always be new challenges. Like I remember when the big language models were made official in 2022, I think. I was like, oh, something new. I don't have room for anything new within our work. But then you just have to accept that society is always moving, and then we have to move along with it and navigate all the different challenges and opportunities that arise for different languages and cultures. So so this is the way it always will be, and that's why it's always exciting to work within these areas. Yeah.
Well, the future of the Latgalian language. I would say that the language will persist as there will be speakers, writers, and culture, and I think that those are things that, of course, we are working with, but at the same time, it's a lot that we do. But of course, there should be a lot more to be done, as you mentioned, also in a systemical way, because already now you can hear how the language is dying, and already in my case, how I speak in Latgalian is that I take Latvian words and I put them in a Latgalian way, which is not that alive language that my grandma would be speaking or that I would be hearing, and we tend to lose those nuances and those like small, very important details, as you mentioned. It's all about.
That's a very good description, because that's exactly how the big language models also work. If I ask ChatGPT to write back to me in Nynorsk, it will think in English and then write back in Nynorsk.
So what you say would be it's important to have Latgalian in kindergartens and schools.
And also just to speak in Latgalian with the kids, because, like, for example, I have a relative who lives in Spain, but she has a small daughter, and she speaks with her in Latgalian. So the first language of a person living in Spain is Latgalian, and then it's interesting but also there are challenges as well, because they go to a local Latvian community. And the kid doesn't understand all the other kids because they speak in Latvian, and she knows the Latgalian, and then of course it's again like next layer of how it's done, and it's interesting how the language also lives and persists, because that you can hear also, for example, with the Latvian language, for those who emigrated after the Second World War, they speak a little bit different. They speak in a different way, and that's how you can see how that language from that time has been conservated, and taught, and how it has been gone through the generations. So I would say that, of course, it's a lot about work with the kids and education, but also media and acceptance of the language, because just recently we have had many cases where it hasn't been okay to speak in Latgalian on a media, or it's not okay to do something in Latgalian, and then there are narratives how the Latgalian is kind of separating us, but at the same time I would say it's an opposite. It's connecting us together, and that's how it shows how we are together, we are accepted, and we are part of the bigger story. So that is about the pluralism that you mentioned in the beginning.
Great. So in addition to all of this, I would just want to mention that literature is so important we're talking about keeping the language alive and in development. Like, it's always the big writers who write great fiction, who have new ideas and try to invent new ways to use the language. So it's really, really important that we all read books. So we go home and read fiction, everyone, and also that we find new writers to develop our language, because that's really where the invention is happening.
Adding to that, the Norwegian nynorsk activists, they have this campaign called Nynorsk Day, where they encourage, and we all do it, we encourage everybody to try to write nynorsk for that particular day. It's the 12th of May. And then you can at least try it for one day, and then you'll find out, oh, it wasn't so bad, and I could do it without so many mistakes. And it's just to start somewhere, and that's where the digital tools have really helped to show that this could be done all over the country, and you really have more impact.
It's been a really successful campaign. It's quite recent, just 4 or 5 years or something, I think. But it's already been very well established in the media landscape that today is the Nynorsk Day, and you can see like all the big politicians of the country posting on their social media and stuff. So it really works really well. Yeah.
We have organized a day when there are mostly Latgalian songs played on the radio on the 27th of April, which is Latgalian Day of the Congress of Latgala. And then the other thing that we have done is also that every year there is a diktats, like when you write down write down the dictation in Latvian, and we have organized it also in Latgalian, that you can also write in Latgalian and try how many mistakes have you done or how you write it. And also what we are doing is we are also having a campaign about the places that are friendly for Latgalian language, or, Latgalian First, where we give stickers and we have a map of the places, which where you kind of, when you enter the place, you see that, oh, here I can speak in Latgalian, and it's called Latgalīšu Valodai draudzīga vieta, or a friendly place for Latgalian language, and also it's like a network of places that are open, that are friendly, and that are kind of encouraging the Latgalian language.
My personal dream for the future of Nynorsk and Latgalian would be to see them on Duolingo someday, and Latvian as well, for that matter. Thank you very much. I think we can open floor to the questions from the audience. Is there someone who would like to ask a question to our panelists? Well, you'll get a microphone.
I wanted to ask about the state of the policy of the Baltic states about Russian and the Russian minority, which speaks Russian in Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. Is that also a case about language democracy? How does that connect? Is there, for example, any policy from the Baltic states coming about the Russian language?
It's a tricky question, as you might suspect. Well, with the Russian language in Latvia, I can comment about the Latvian situation, where it has been very much connected with the politics, of course, because of a big referendum that we had about Russian language as a national language. It was in 2000 and I don't know, but at the same time, the referendum about having a Russian language as the national language, it had very much political connotations, and of course the other thing is about also a very sensitive question of Russian-speaking schools, because we still have them, and then of course now there have been many movements about changing that, because I think that with the Russian language, my personal opinion would be that there should be a place for Russian language and for Russian culture if it's together with the Latvian culture and language. So because the situation, for example, in Rēzekne is that if it's a Russian school, there's no Latvian. And that is a bit tricky, because you create bubbles, and with the bubbles you create also narratives that are not always
Yeah, there should be an integrated society. So that is problem that still, although now in schools Latvian is the main language taught, then still people are speaking about Latvian and Russian schools. And it's very difficult to understand when you come from outside, how can you create one society where you, in the very school system, have this segregation and not that everybody learn together. And then when Latvian language is strong, it's easy then to, for instance, have extra lesson for Russian and also other Polish, Belarusian, Ukrainian, other languages, English as a mother tongue within the Latvian school system. So because it's of course important for every language to be developed as a mother tongue. But here it's about the lingua franca of society. What will be our common language in a democracy be? But of course, all languages have value.
If I can quickly share, then, for example, I finished a Polish school in Rezekne, and then, like, for example, all of the curriculum was in Latvian, and then, like, something extra was Polish. And then it was interesting how this Polish school created a very integrated place for Russian-speaking and for Latvian-speaking kids, because the Polish language, as this, like, third thing, kind of connected all of us together. And then I think that was, like, our school was a very good, like, integration project, so to say, because we were neither a Latvian or a Russian school, we were a Polish school. And that's why it was like a safe space in between, and still is a place where, for example, Russian-speaking families are sending their kids to learn Latvian, but as a Latvian-speaking family, you know that there will be a place that your kids will learn Russian, because, like, half of the class could be Russian-speaking. And that's why I think it was a very good exchange in between, and everybody kind of benefits from that.
So, like, a follow-up question could be: is the key or is the goal bilinguality, like bilingualism in this case, between, like, the Russian schools and the Latvian schools? Because a local in Tallinn, I got the information that, for example, 44% of population in Tallinn is a Russian-speaking minority, and they couldn't really answer whether bilingualism is, like, the answer, or whether the Russian-speaking Estonians should just convert to Estonian, which is, like, the current policy of the state.
I would not answer on behalf of the state, but as a linguist, of course, it's very good with bilingualism, and that helps also in other subjects when you have this possibility of, like, thinking in two different ways. And the benefits of having more than one mother tongue is good. Yes.
Thank you.
I think we might have time for one more question, a short one. Yep.
Thanks. Could you elaborate a little bit more on why a functioning democracy really needs a variety of languages?
I can start. I can try. All of this, the idea of lesser used languages having a place in a modern democracy, it boils down to what is our idea of a modern nation state, which is actually a quite new idea. It's not that long ago. It's like the origin of our Ninos language came with the idea of the modern democracy. And the idea of the Ninos language was that every citizen should have their own voice. And so that's it boils down to that. If we don't give every citizen their own voice, or every subculture their place to exist, or their room for them in society, then you have a pressure cooker, you know? And then the democracy loses its legitimacy. So there's some people have an idea of nationalism as the ideal is a society where everyone's the same, but that will never work. And it shouldn't be like that either, because it would be, frankly, very boring. But also very dangerous, to be more serious, yeah. So that's why.
If somebody wants to add to that, we have a 1 minute to do that. But it doesn't seem to be the case. The last thing that I would like you to do, and maybe you to do, is to say language and democracy in Latgalian, and nynorsk, just for the audience to hear how it sounds.
Valoda un demokrātija.
Språk og demokrati.
And we would conclude with that. Thank you very much for the discussion. Thank you, the audience.